Thank you.
So it's a really great pleasure to have Anders Hejlsberg here with me on stage. Anders is a technical fellow at Microsoft. I'll get back to that term in a second. Anders joined Microsoft in '96 and has been in the industry for 35 years. Your first big achievement was to write Turbo Pascal. And today you're the chief designer of the C# programming language TypeScript. You're considered quite a hero here in Denmark, but also internationally for being one of the fathers of some of the newer programming languages. So first of all, what is it to be a technical fellow? Is it just a title, or what is it? It's a quite elite group. I believe there's only among 20 or 30 people worldwide who carry this title of technical fellow.
Well, at
What
Microsoft, yes.
At Microsoft,
Right,
yes.
right. Well, it's sort of the, sometimes I joke it's the title they use for you where they don't know what else to call you. And you know, but it is the top of the engineering ladder. So if you've chosen to stay in the technical track instead of becoming a people manager or whatever, technical fellow is sort of where you end up, and that's the end of the line. Yeah,
So it is actually the geekiness of geekiness.
It is, and instead of having people responsibilities, you have big technical responsibilities. And my particular area is programming languages and software development tools, which, as you said, I've been doing for a long time. It's actually, this month is Turbo Pascal's 35th birthday, which is
quite
a little bit scary, you know, and you can look at my hair and you'll see that I've been doing it for a while now, yeah.
Good. So, given that you normally have your daily life at the Microsoft campus in Redmond, I think it could be interesting for the audience to hear a bit about what does your life look like in Redmond?
Well, so for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been involved in an open source project called TypeScript. And that's where I have my sort of day-to-day goings. TypeScript is it's a very agile team. We sit in a team room of 10 to 20 people. You know, we used to on campus at Redmond. It used to all be offices, and you sort of had to seek out other people in order to have interaction. But now we're all in a team room. And it's great, actually. So, you know, I single-handedly raise the average age in the room by 10 years every morning when I show up. But it's fun to be there. I do work at home also 2 days a week, which is where I do a lot of my thinking and coding. I still write a lot of code. In fact, I write more code now than I did probably in the past 15 years, and I really enjoy it. So
it's good to hear that agile teaming has made it all the way to Redmond.
Oh yeah.
Just staying a bit on TypeScript, which is kind of the main project you're working on right now.
Right.
What does it solve for developers, and why was it necessary?
Well, so TypeScript is about enabling large-scale JavaScript application development, and really about making developers more productive. I mean, throughout my entire career, it's the thing I've been delivering, if you will, is developer productivity. And I got involved in the TypeScript projects, as I said, it's probably about 7 years ago now. Simply because we were seeing that people started writing larger and larger JavaScript applications and were having a very hard time doing it. And then I got curious about why is that? And it turns out that there's a whole bunch of stuff that you can apply from other statically typed programming languages, even in a dynamic programming language like JavaScript, even though that seems counterintuitive at first. And so, you know, so there was a whole bunch of programming language geekiness that you could go for there, and I like that sort of stuff. And so I just sort of fell into it, really, sort of by accident, and now it's become my main thing. Before that, I mean, I'm still involved in the C# design process, and I'm on the C# design team, but I don't do that as my day-to-day job anymore.
Good. And you mentioned before that TypeScript was an open source project, you could say. And if we look at it, more and more technology is based on open source, and Microsoft has been, some would say, quite a turnaround in open source and our approach to it. And today we are heavily contributing to the open source community.
Yes.
If you look ahead, what is your attitude towards open source, and what do you expect from open source as a paradigm in the future?
Well, I mean, it's no secret. I'm a big believer in the paradigm, and again, the project I work on now was one of the first sort of products that started from day zero being open source, which 7 years ago at Microsoft was definitely not as easy of a proposition as it is today. You know, we had to do an awful lot of persuading people that this was the right way to go. But now we're all on a journey, and I'd say our team probably is further along the journey than maybe a lot of other groups. And I think there's a lot of learnings that you have there. You know, you start when you first approach open source. You might think that it's just about like making your source code publicly available, you know, so other people can copy it and then do stuff with it, and then you just sort of check that box, and then you go back and you do all your normal internal processes. You know, you just scrape the issue tracker, put it back in your internal system, and that is technically open source, but it's not open development. And there's another aspect of that whole thing called open development, and it's you're not really doing open source until you also do that. And that means putting all of your processes out in the open. Our team today, and for the last 4.5 years, have been hosted on GitHub. That is our daily cockpit. Literally, you wake up in the morning and you look at the issue tracker. You are about this far away from your users, you know, and that there's just no distortion, no links in between. Like whenever you write code, all of your users see it. Whenever they have ideas that they want to submit to your product, they can put up pull requests, et cetera, et cetera. We have nightly builds that you can pick up, you know, so someone will report an issue in the morning, and we'll typically have a fix in a nightly build, and you can pick it up the next day, you know, and then it's just wonderfully liberating to be that close to the metal, you know, in your development process. And that's all part of the open source philosophy and spirit, you know, and I'm a great fan of that. I think also just, you know, computers are just getting more and more capable all the time, yet our brains aren't changing, right? I mean, and that means there's more and more that we don't have time to invent. We need to find better ways to reuse what already exists. And open source is fantastic that way, right? I mean, there is so much code that exists in open source that has been vetted and tested and used over and over, and the kind of leverage you can get from employing that, you know, is just great. And that goes for everybody. That goes for Microsoft. It goes for all of our users as well.
It sounds like you think it's the only right way of doing it almost, right?
Well,
it's more, why is it so important for a big player like Microsoft to also play a part in the open source community?
Well, I think, I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, and ultimately, you know, open source is very altruistic, and at the end of the day, someone has to pay for it, right? and then we can argue about what's the right models there, you know, but I do think even when you're building proprietary products, there are often parts of your proprietary product that would actually be better served in open source, like your extensibility models and whatever, or your APIs and so forth. So there are lots of aspects there that I think are important even when you're doing proprietary software development.
Yeah. So it's not only about giving back, it is actually because our collective intelligence is larger than our single.
That, and then also I think, you know, one of the shift that has happened in, at least one of the key parts of the shift that's happened in Microsoft over the last 5 years or so is really meeting our users and our customers where they're at. And you know, honestly, developers are at open source, you know, and we can pretend all we want that they're not, but people can be in this world today. There are so many options. You can be totally free to ignore Microsoft if we're not doing the right thing, you know. So we got to do the right thing.
But that goes for developers, but you could also say that some of our other strategies has
Oh, absolutely. I think it, but open source sort of came from the developer community, right? And now it's gradually spreading its philosophy, I would say, yeah.
Just coming back to a point that you mentioned before, in an interview with Kevin Scott, who's the CTO of Microsoft, not so long ago, you said, code is getting bigger and bigger, but our brains are not getting bigger. This is largely a brain exercise.
Yeah.
So what is your advice on how to live with that and still make the most of the newest innovation?
Well, I mean, what I was alluding to there was also, we were talking, I think, about like why I'm interested in programming languages. And programming languages have always had sort of this deeper connection to the human. You know, it's really sort of the part of computers or computer science that is more humanly connected. You know, it's related to spoken languages. You know, programmers even talk about how they dream in a particular programming language, and it shapes how we form our thoughts and how we think about problems. You know, we think about algorithms in a particular programming language often. And I think with it's like I said, it's important really to in today's environment that it used to be that there was only so much capacity in these computers, and you know, for every version of your product you could literally start all over, right? And then just because there was only 640K you could fill up, and then it was done, right? And that took about a year, and then that coincided with a new product release. But now it's computers are bottomless pits with infinite amounts of capacity and capability, and so it's all about finding leverage and about putting yourself in the seat of being the creative force in the process, as opposed to doing the drudgery. And there's plenty of drudgery when it comes to computers and writing code, right? And that's, again, why open source is important, because so much exists there. Don't spend your time reinventing the wheel, you know. Be the creative force. That's what we bring to the equation, if you will, or what it's all about, right? Is creating something new out of things that you can leverage.
But you could also say that's a bit of a paradigm shift of this not having to invent everything yourself, right? And especially as a developer, I at least have met a few in my career that really wanted to own everything from bottom to top, right? And do everything. And also in larger corporations, you often have a strategy where you actually want to own all the components that go into your production environment or into your customer solutions.
Yeah.
So, but it sounds like the paradigm shift means that you will have to actually open up and look differently.
I don't think you can survive if you try to do everything yourself. It is simply not feasible anymore. You know, I mean, you're not going to build your own AI system or your own. I mean, like we're putting everything in the cloud because we don't want to do our own IT anymore, right? It's leverage all the time.
But I still see a lot of companies trying.
Possibly, but yeah.
And are we investing enough in supporting humans in this very vastly developed technological world? I think an example you and I discussed yesterday when we met was that at Microsoft in Lyngby, we've just opened a quantum laboratory, which is where we develop the physical parts, so the qubits, to actually form, hopefully, the world's first quantum computer, right? Yeah. But the point is more that we seem to invest a lot in the physical stuff. But how can we as humans with our limited capabilities and capacity actually use that when we get there? So are we investing enough in the programming side of it, on how do we actually use the massive capacity that we're building? That was a big question.
That is a big question. I do think we are, but again, it's actually, and I'm not quite sure how to answer that one. So
then don't. It was not fair. It was actually not part of the question. So I just thought it was such an interesting discussion to have, right?
Yeah.
That we build these supercomputers, and you could say the cloud was the first of it, and then you have to adjust the programming languages to actually leverage capacity.
I mean, when you approach AI and when you look at AI's role, which we're all still exploring. I mean, we don't all know where this is going to go, right? But I do think, like, I've always approached computing with a certain level of criticality. I mean, criticalness in your thinking, right? I mean, I think you need to always understand, like that nothing is free, and if it's free, someone is paying somewhere, right? And what is their motive for paying, you know? And then we don't get like Facebook just for free. There's, you know, people are selling ads, and they want us to, and so I mean, always understand or try to understand how it hangs together. And I think it's important to raise. I mean, I try with my kids, you know, too, to teach them to think critically about what's being fed back at them, because I mean, computers today have completely eliminated any friction for publishing information now and disseminating information, right? Be that true information or not true information, and therefore the onus now is upon us to think critically about what we absorb, right, at all times. And it's something that perhaps we didn't have to do previously, right?
Just to follow up on that, and also given the experience we just had with Cecilia and her friend Mary, do you have any concerns about AI, or do you see it as only good? And that's almost a naive question, right, coming out of this session, but more to your point about somewhere somebody is also paying for it, and there is some consideration. So what's your thinking on AI?
You know, AI is I think, but one more in a long stream of technological advances that we've seen in our industry, and every technological advance has a good side and a potentially evil side, right? And so again, it's always important to be critical in your thinking about these new technologies and understand, you know, not just what it is that it can bring to your business, but also what are the dangers, you know, that it might, and always be aware of, be good custodians of data that you are harvesting or that you are collecting, right? And that I'm a great fan of Europe's work in the general data protection laws that were just passed, right? Because at the end of the day, the world is not here for the machines; it's here for the humans, right? And so we need to always make sure we put the humans first.
Yeah, which can be difficult.
Yes, yes.
So just shifting gears a bit, the only picture you ever posted on Instagram was in 2013. So if you look up Anders Hejlsberg on Instagram, he's posted one picture. It's not the most interesting account to follow, I can say. Rather follow you on Twitter.
Yeah.
But and what it is that you posted is the monument for the failed Microsoft program called Bob.
Uh-huh.
And that was an experiment to do an entirely new type of interface for consumers.
Right.
Actually, novices, you would say, of IT. Mm-hmm. And it totally failed, to say it
Totally,
mildly.
yes.
It was the list of on the 50 worst inventions ever by Time magazine. That's something, right? So what was the reason for that post, if you can recall it?
Well, part of its post is that I'm old enough to remember Bob, you know, and actually ran it and actually did, my God, cringe. It was cringeworthy. It still is. I mean, it exists out there on the web somewhere. You can go play with it. But at that time, too, it was just, hey, I needed an Instagram account so I could see what my kids are up to, because that's where the kids hang out, because they don't hang out on Facebook anymore, because that's where the grown-ups hang out, and therefore they don't want to be there. So I had to just post something, and that particular little tile there on the Hall of Fame from is just outside our office, you know. So I just that was.
So just to continue on that track, because it's, as we all know, and our friend Mary also reminded us, it's not the first epic fail that Microsoft has done, and probably not the last.
Yeah.
So did you ever make something that failed completely?
Yes, there's one project I remember back from my Borland days, after having done, I think we did 6 or 7 versions of Turbo Pascal, and before we did this product called Delphi, in between there we had a project called Monet, which was about visual programming, which was the fatty buzzword at the time, you know, software ICs. You know, everyone was sort of looking at, hey, can't we just build software like we build hardware with ICs that have inputs and outputs, and then we draw wires between them, and then we can make programs that way, and we don't have to write code, because code is like ugly.
So that was your Bob.
And that was our Bob, if you will, and it turned and it demoed wonderfully, right? I mean, we had Fahrenheit to centigrade converters, you know, that was just fantastic, super easy to build them with this thing. Just put input boxes and outputters and adders and whatever. But then when you tried to build real world apps, it just turned into this morass of wires going everywhere, and it was completely not feasible. And I sometimes joke that, you know, it proved to me that sometimes a line of code is worth 1,000 pictures, right? And there's something about, you know, and so I went back to, okay, well, I mean, it's back to programming languages, and I've learned my lesson, and I've stayed with that since. But there is something about the incredible succinctness of programming languages and code, and the fact that they're expressed in text. I mean, because at that time, I remember, you know, I mean, surely, you know, yes, today we're writing programs by typing them in, but surely in 10 years the machines will write them for us, or we will, and here we are. It's been, what, 50, 60 years, and programming languages don't really look all that different. No. And it's because they're connected to the human much more than to the machine, right? And we're the weak link in the process there, if you will. Yeah.
So we'll leave developing to developers and not think we could do a graphical interface to make everyone developers.
The creative side of it, absolutely. Yeah.
But I see actually my kids playing with graphical programming today, so it's not entirely that.
Oh no.
Back then.
But yeah.
For simpler stuff, it seems to be working.
Yes.
At least in elementary schools. And your learning coming out of that, what was kind of the main learning?
Well, I think it's just, you know, the programming languages are just a thing that you can't just ignore them. You shouldn't believe that they're just going to go away, right? Because they do evolve slowly on a human scale, just like math evolves slowly, and they're really connected to math and logic much more than they're connected to the incredible advances we've seen in hardware. They're the medium through which you communicate with the machine, right? But they're actually not a machine.
So, and which reminds me of a discussion we had just before we started the keynote with Rafael, the next keynote. We had a discussion on my past, which was a bit more techy, and we had the discussion what actually won in data exchange. Was it XML or EDI?
Uh-huh.
And you said it actually never dies.
Oh, nothing ever dies. I mean,
so what's your point in the development world of nothing ever dies?
Well, as a programming language designer, you come to realize pretty quickly that you can add stuff, but you can never take anything away, because the minute you take something away, you break everybody's code. And I sometimes joke, you know, you show me the perfect programming language, and I'll show you a programming language with no users, because that's really the only way that you get to repair the faults of the past. So you sort of have to be very conservative and very judicious about what you add, because you full well know that every time you add something, that anchor you're dragging behind you gets a little bit bigger, and eventually someone will come in a speedboat and go right past you because they've convinced people to get rid of everything and write in a new language, right? So yes, so nothing ever goes away. XML is going to be, EDI is going to be around, and at some point JSON will also be legacy, and there'll be something else. And now we have one more, you know, for the.
But I like the notion on nothing ever goes away. It still lives somewhere out there.
Yeah.
So going a bit back to Redmond, where we started our conversation. I know this is a big question, but let's hear it anyway. So, from your experience, what's top of mind at Microsoft headquarters right now?
Well, I mean, I don't think Microsoft headquarters are all that different from where we are here today, and obviously AI and ML is a big theme there. it's very pervasive, and the more you look at it, the more you come to realize that it's not a single discipline. It's really, truly many disciplines rolled into one, right? I mean, like there's data extraction, and there's algorithm selection. There's all sorts of, there's like things that relate to programming languages. And we do think about, like in my group, we have working groups to think about what does ML mean for the programming experience. But that's just one facet of it, right? There's also the entire math side of it. There's the infrastructure side of it, like propping up data centers. Should we put GPUs or FPGAs in there, and what should they look like, and what it was? So it's pervasive, and and a lot of energy is going into it for sure in all areas.
Yeah, across business groups, definitely. So staying a bit on the bigger Microsoft. Can you share with us what's the next big thing coming out of Microsoft?
Oh God. There are so many things coming out all the time, right?
What are you the most excited about?
I'm just excited about really just sticking to my guns. I'm an engineer's engineer, if you will, which is why I'm not a people manager. I like to do the technical side of it. I love making programmers productive, and that has sort of been the golden thread throughout my entire career, and I'm going to stick with that, because there's just something incredibly satisfying in building products and then seeing users use them and be super grateful for them, and that's what gets you up every day in the morning and gets you excited and gets you going to work. So yeah.
So my last question for you was actually: is there anything you still feel you need to accomplish?
Oh gosh. No, I have to say I feel incredibly fortunate, to have gotten into this business. Right when it was starting, right, and have had the ability to ride it all the way from the bottom floor. I mean, my business partners and I had the first computer store in Copenhagen, where you could walk in and buy a kit computer, and it was complete crap back then, right? And now it's literally
less crap.
And now it literally runs the world, right? And it's like, having been part of that journey is just been amazing. So no, I can't say that there are a lot of regrets that I have.
But you have to promise us you're not stopping yet.
No. I'm going to keep at it.
Still developers that need you out there.
Yeah.
So with that, I really want to thank you. If you want to hear more from Anders, he will have a breakout session at 12:30 after lunch, where you can hear kind of the deep dive on TypeScript.
That's right. Looking
with
forward
that,
to it.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great to have
Thank
you.
you.